Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jorge Alvarez, and I'll be moderating today's webinar, AI Governance in Practice, What Firms Actually Monitor, Document, and Defend, sponsored by SurgeONE. Thank you for joining us. Over the past few years, AI tools have started appearing across many everyday workflows inside financial firms. Advisors are experimenting with research tools, note-taking applications, content generation tools, and a growing number of AI-powered vendor platforms. At the same time, regulators are beginning to ask more direct questions about how firms supervise and document these technologies. So the challenge many organizations are facing right now is this: how do you operationalize AI governance in practice? Today's conversation will focus exactly on that: how firms are actually defining acceptable AI use, supervising AI-assisted workflows, and documenting those processes in ways that stand up to regulatory scrutiny. We'll also discuss how firms can implement governance frameworks without slowing down productivity or innovation, which is another major concern many organizations are navigating right now. I'm delighted to be joined by three experts who bring complementary perspectives across technology, compliance, and operational oversight. First, Sid Yenamandra, CEO of SurgeONE. Sid has spent years building compliance and cybersecurity technology for the wealth management industry and helping firms operationalize governance frameworks across complex technology environments. Hi, Sid, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Jorge. Excited to be here.
Next, Mimi Legay, CEO and founder of MGL Consulting. Mimi brings decades of experience advising RIAs and broker-dealers on regulatory readiness, compliance programs, and exam preparation. Welcome, Mimi.
Thank you, Jorge. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. And last but not least, Aaron Spradlin, Chief Technology and Security Officer at United Planners Financial Services. Aaron leads technology and security strategy for one of the industry-leading broker-dealers and has been deeply involved in thinking how firms manage emerging technology risks. Aaron, nice to have you with us today.
You bet. I'm excited to learn from the experts, right?
Awesome. So today's session will be a moderated session. We'll walk through a series of questions and explore how firms are approaching AI governance in real operational environments. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A session with questions from the audience. So please feel free to send your questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. With that, let's get started. Aaron, let's start with you. As a CTO responsible for technology and security across broker-dealer environments, what concerns you most about AI today that many firms may not yet be thinking about?
Well, that is what concerns me about AI today is really the lack of definition of what it really is, what it really encompasses, how to categorize, track, risk, and oversight, right? And so what really concerns me, I think the same thing concerns Mimi, is really just this question about the lack of definition, the lack of clarity around the risk and what risk is being taken, everywhere from data leakage to zero-day, no-click, agentic, and all these different terms. And so even getting agreement on what the terms mean, because the regulators are starting to ask questions, as you said, and in those questions, you have to have good answers, and those good answers also require good policy, procedures, and controls. And so what really concerns me is this expanse of, what's happening is how we're going to navigate these policy procedures, and most importantly, the controls. And that's, part of, I think, what we're wanting to cover today.
Awesome. Anything from your end, Sid and Mimi, on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I'll second that. I mean, I think we are living through some interesting times right now. AI use is certainly increasing at a dramatic rate. Models are coming out. It seems like every 4 months there seems to be an improvement in model quality. So like the Claudes or the Geminis or the ChatGPTs. And we're starting to see firms and users use these models to increasingly do work and tasks with it. But with that comes a lot of threat, right? Both from a cybersecurity standpoint, but also the fact that regulators, as Aaron, you were saying, regulators are stepping up their questioning of firms and on what they're doing with AI use. So I think while people are increasing the adoption of AI, I think guardrails around AI and controls around AI have also got to get to that point where people are comfortable. So I think it's an
Right.
interesting time.
Yeah, we've seen this before, Sid, in our industry, is where in the early, 2000s, where SaaS became and distributed data and SaaS environment. And so, in your prior life, it was this challenge you were facing and I were facing around how do you do vendor due diligence when the data has been pushed to the edge, when every vendor is out there kind of doing their own cybersecurity posture, when every vendor is focused on the lowest cost, but you can't do low cost and high security, right? So it's high feature, low cost. Well, what's going to give security in the triangle? And so it was like, how do we address this industry? When now all of a sudden, that's still actually a reality, even with all the acquisitions and what's been going in the industry. But now it's even gotten worse because now everybody's bringing in AI. And right now, the real risk, again, is that these vendors don't really understand AI. They're confusing the market as to what they're even doing with AI. And so it's right now another race from a vendor perspective, to everybody to say AI to everything. And so that's starting to confuse advisors. It's confusing the regulators. It's creating significant risk. And so firms like ourselves are, who have advisors who are independent, who own their own infrastructure, own their own devices, are now faced with a next generation challenge,
Right.
which is just beyond vendor due diligence, which is important, but now in heightened vendor due diligence that includes AI. Beyond
Well,
device security, but device security that now includes the no-click, the threats AI are going to present and are already presenting for zero-day attacks in a no-click environment. And then beyond that, just the overall ability to even enforce the policy procedures, because as you know, in your prior life, and Mimi, you could speak to this, is that challenge that we all face, which is, okay, but they're going to ask the more important question is, do you have a policy? Do you have a control? But most important, how do you enforce it?
Yeah.
And I think if you want to speak to that a little bit, Mimi, I think that's one of the bigger challenges I think nobody's really even thinking about from a vendor and a device
Yeah,
perspective.
I was going to say that's one of the problems that chief compliance officers are facing today and compliance professionals are facing, because on one side you've got the demand from the financial professionals who obviously want to adopt the new technology and be able to work smarter, not harder. But from the chief compliance officer's perspective, you've got the regulators on the other side. The CCO is caught in the middle and having to figure out, okay, what policies do I need to put in place? Once I put those policies in place, how am I going to enforce those policies? How do I train my supervisors what to look for and how to monitor the activities? And so, and then you have so many different types of uses for AI that the CCOs are also trying to figure out, okay, how are my different vendors using AI so that I can make sure that I have the appropriate guardrails set up around those uses. And, FINRA just came out with the vendor questionnaire that they've been sending out annually for the last 3 years, and it was due earlier this month. And there was a question devoted specifically to whether or not your firm or your firm's vendors are using artificial intelligence, whether it's an agentic AI or if it's a large language model or something else. And, CCOs are walking out into these conferences and looking at all the vendors that say, we use AI and we're doing AI for this. They don't know the difference. They're not tech
Yeah, they
guys.
don't even know the difference. Their salespeople don't know the difference between agentic, non-agentic, the risk around agentic, right? And OpenClaw is an example of the
Right.
risk around agentic. Beyond that, on most advisors don't even realize that one of their number one risks today of all things is their Windows operating system and their iPhone, because both of them are operating at some level agentically, meaning independently of the advisor's actions. And so whether it's the challenges now with Windows deciding that they're going to put Copilot into everything. And as a sidebar, at United Planners, we've turned off Copilot on all of our home office devices because it is such a security threat. So you have the security threat of the endpoint device and the no-click attacks and Copilot, or even the iPhone devices, which I think Elon's popular for saying that he's, not even wanting to use iPhone now with its new AI, capabilities, and what that means. But then you got the data leakage challenges that are purposely done by advisors on top of, different type of tools out there. You've got the vendors who are, operating at a high feature, low security posture that don't even know what guardrails mean, or, how to even do guardrails. So the regulators are right, by the way, to be asking these questions, because I think by asking the questions, they are demanding the industry measure twice before everybody starts jumping into this high feature and kind of a the challenge we're facing. And now you and I get to play this role, and Sid plays a role, which is I'm the technology guy that's supposed to decipher the meaning of all this. You're the security, you're the chief operation officer who's supposed to say, what's going on? You're talking to me and I'm trying to decipher it, makes sense to you. And then you got the technology solutions person like Sid, who's out there saying, okay, what do you need in your stack so that he can meet my needs, meet your needs, and ultimately deliver a stack that's capable of doing this. So Jorge, I mean, I think this has been a really good kind of overall laying out the domain that we're all facing as industry.
100%. So all that you are discussing is like there are many different components that are moving. Many of them are causing risks, right? And firms are trying to figure out how to avoid those risks. And you mentioned something, Aaron, that I thought was very interesting in terms of Copilot at United Planners. How do you think about those many tools, and not just Copilot, but so many other tools that advisors may be using for broker dealers? Is the solution turning things off, or are there other ways to do it?
Yeah, well, solution, and this is what I think makes United Planners unique. So I'm going to do commercial for United Planners just by saying, we've been saying out there in our press releases, and as a culture is what we want to say yes. We've said yes in the past. We drove vendor integrations. We were a thought leader in that whole space, which is why we partnered with endpoint device monitoring and security, and led the industry on vendor due diligence, and led the industry on many different initiatives to say yes to vendors. So I need to say yes to AI. Okay, that's the reality. So how do you say yes to AI is where the actual intellectual capital exists, right? So that starts with saying yes to AI. So we're going to say no to Copilot. What am I going to say yes to, right? And so it's most firms are out there just doing the no to everything, but then that creates its own risk, which is people are going to still do it, but outside of your oversight. So how do you say yes? Well, starting with the device itself, part of what we've done is we brought on Surge to create a stack. The first stack is how do we know as a company what vendors we've even approved and why we've approved them, red, green, yellow. So we got a vendor management tool, which is what you need in your stack. Now, as you've done that, you have to have all your devices that are connected and the ability to know what those devices are using all across all of your vendors, what's approved, what's not approved, so you can risk management, communicate with your advisors. Hey, saw you go to OpenAI. We have an alternative solution for you that has guardrails. We prefer that you use. And so it's about how you give them technology solutions that have guardrails, but you also have the ability to audit your procedures and enforce your policies. So as it relates to part of our partnership with Surge long-term is about not only compliance, not only about vendor due diligence, not only about endpoint device protection, but also about this challenge we're talking about, which is the no-click, zero-day attacks, agentic agents, and be able to identify when that's happening. And I think they're capable of meeting our needs in the future and doing that. So it's, as a security and a compliance officer, our firm, we're looking for levers. So to your point, really when you're challenged with this kind of well, we're turning Copilot off, but we're also enabling different vendors and different capabilities that will put the guardrails that we can say yes to And then beyond that, that we can enforce our policies through the SurgeOne platform. So it's really about a stack, and Surge gives us all the different levers within the full capabilities of compliance to cybersecurity that we're not in the industry today. People, processes, and technology. That's got to be the way you're going to address AI and cybersecurity challenges in the future. And that's going to be, I think, a differentiator for us and for the industry, is those that can deliver that are going to have a competitive advantage in the AI world we're heading into.
That's great. Sid, based on what Aaron is discussing and from your perspective as the CEO of Surge, how do you see the role and your vision for SurgeOne to keep up with all these risks? Because we know that this technology is not something that, it's not a cloud, right? That came out and, you're on the cloud, that's it. This is evolving on a daily basis, right? And there are new ways of apply to use it. So what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, so as we discussed earlier, with the increasing threat of AI use within broker-dealer environments, I think Aaron touched upon a lot of these points. We saw this in the prior decade, right? With cybersecurity, advisors were fanatically independent. They had their own devices, they had their own infrastructure, as you said, Aaron. We're starting to see increasing use of AI systems within their environments and keeping control of that. So not just the device, but the infrastructure, as well as the apps that these advisors are using. Many of those apps have AI in them, or they're using a ChatGPT or a Gemini or a Claude. How do you police that? How do you ensure that you as a broker dealer, you have all of the controls in place to monitor their use, right? And the threat that emanates from some of these apps. So one of the biggest things that we always talk about is if you can't inventory all the apps that your advisors are using, you can't protect them because you don't even know what the attack surface looks like. It could be infinite. And so, we see AI use, given all the questions that the regulators are now asking, they ask the pointed question, do you know what AI systems your advisors are using? So how do you inventory those systems? That's question number one. Once you know what they're using, question number two is how do you police them? How do you ensure that they're meeting your policies? So it could be things like, are they moving client data to those models, right? So let's say somebody's using Claude or someone's using ChatGPT. How do you know that the advisor isn't taking an Excel spreadsheet that has client data and uploading it into ChatGPT and asking it questions about, doing portfolio risk analysis or doing some calculations? Now you're exposing private data to a model, which is in direct violation of your own privacy policy. So data exfilling is a big threat that we see. And I think, Aaron, you talked about, zero-click attacks. There's a lot of, this has been rampant for years, but there's been a lot of phishing emails that folks get. But now those phishing emails have prompts that are embedded in them, that if people click on them, they could leverage your local AI capability to do some pretty interesting things. So, I think we're starting to see that holy grail of the browser to endpoint, that Grand Canyon that existed before, that's getting bridged now with a lot of the AI capability, right? And so that gives attackers a lot of power, a lot of control. So you have to protect against that. So we're starting to see kind of the next wave. And, I think Aaron kind of spearheaded a lot of this in the prior generation, right? With cybersecurity. I think United Planners, you guys were one of the first ones to take cybersecurity of your advisors to heart. And you actually launched a program, I believe it was called the Defend Up program. And, we were excited to be part of that. But I think now with AI, you're starting to see kind of the version 2.0 of that, with more focus on AI controls and more focus on data and data exfilling vectors.
Right. Yes.
the-
And so to your point is, what we've been able to do is partner with what you have to create the answer was again a yes. Okay. So how do you say yes to AI? And then more importantly, let's talk about that, right? So we've in-house at our firm all the AI due diligence internally. We don't expect advisors, and they're not the experts in technology in most cases and AI. And so we go through the vendor due diligence for them, powered by Surge. We go through all of the AI vendor due diligence, and we say, we're able to talk to the AI companies and figure out most AI companies are not even AI companies, they're prompt engineers. Okay. So the first thing is most of the vendors out there that are saying they're doing AI, well, they're actually just doing prompt engineering, which is its own thing. And that's its own science. And then you have other people, sorry about that, my screen froze up, I think. But other people are, actually using models, some of them securely inside of something like a Bedrock, others through open prompts to the open APIs, and we need to talk to them about what they're using and different models they're using. Then beyond that, guardrails, archival, how are they encrypting the data, archiving data? What are they doing around those types of challenges? And most firms haven't gotten into guardrails, which is a major issue. But beyond that, how do you say yes? Well, now you've got a vendor due diligence program, you've got device, you can set a policy, you can enforce your policy by monitoring the devices and where they're going, and then you can protect you from a cybersecurity perspective. But I think a unique thing that people aren't even talking about is that Surge also has a product called Cover, which has been really critical to us as we're starting to collect all of the various data from the vendors and all the different data from our data warehouse and integrating with their new RegVerse product, which is their new compliance tool that they have that Mimi has helped building and warehousing all of that. But you see, that's the reality of that is for any enterprise that wants to do AI, you need to also have your own data warehouse, data hub, right? And so if you're going to start getting into pattern detection and you're going to try to power AI, ye who hosts the data, ye who owns the data, owns the competitive advantage. And that's the reality of AI today. And so there's another thing, which is now that we've been able to create this stack, on the top of the stack is the product from Cover, which now we're able to start collecting all this various data. And now you can do insights and things like that. Now you have vendors out there like the Orions of the world, and there's different people that are doing that one-off for advisors. But what we're doing with this stack is getting the cybersecurity, regulatory, and AI on top of being able to look at what's happening within the stack. And Sid and Mimi can talk to that. But beyond that, now we're actually able to empower AI with different tools and partners that we want to work with beyond just what Surge is doing. We've got other advisors vendors that we're talking to about how to get insights from the power of the collection of information and licensing and data warehousing at a much reduced rate cost from what you can do with other solutions that are in the market today. And so ultimately, it's about the stack that solves today's problems, but enables future cybersecurity, future challenges, and allows you as a company to pull the levers. And so some companies might engage Surge, and it's not a Surge commercial, but just to advise advisors and enterprises. You might engage over here on the left and say, hey, I'm looking at the data hub. I love that idea. Or you may engage at the device level. I need to do the device. Or you may engage at the vendor due diligence level. Or you may engage at the, I want to place Reg Ed, which is what we did. And I want to go to a new platform that's more, holistic. The beauty is they also have the people, which is another part of saying yes, right? So, maybe we don't have some capacity. And so they have capacity in the technology space, endpoint space. They have capacity in the regulatory space. And they have capacity in the vendor due diligence space as far as human capital, the technology. And so for us, it was like, who are we going to partner with in this real new world that we're facing? And I think right now, if you're an advisor listening to this podcast or an enterprise, you're looking for a partner. And that's what you're really looking for at this point. And you're looking for culture, right? So you're looking for culture and a partner. And those are the things that you're making the decision about right now, because it's really not about current AI today. It's about where are we going and who are you going to partner with to challenge, to be able to pull the levers and meet the regulatory needs and the regulatory challenges and the cybersecurity challenges in this bold new world we're heading into. So that's my long speech.
Makes sense. Yep.
That's great. Thank you. So I guess that we talked about the risks and how from compliance perspective you can enforce policies. Actually, you can create policies, but um, I guess like a kind of more critical question here is how to enforce them, right? So once you have that, and probably you can share a little bit from your perspective, Aaron, and on how United Planners do it, uh, because again, having the policy in place, sure, that's one thing, but making sure that they are actually implemented and they're enforced. Is there any advice that you can share to our audience?
Yeah, well, I'd start by saying talk to the compliance person on this call, because Mimi, we can kind of ping pong this one back and forth. But the first thing you want to do is, you got to first of all start with what identify the risk, right? Uh, Understand what your policy and procedures are going to be, and then dictate those based on enforcement, right? And then you have the risk factors that you face as a firm, which is advisors don't want to hear no, or vendors are out there overselling products to people. And the reality is most of the stuff you're hearing on the market today, I'm going to say something I'm known for being controversial, but most what the vendors are selling today is vaporware, right? I'm calling it Robo 2.0, right? So, as an advisor, just be aware of the fact that a lot of what's going on is just throwing the name AI on something, over promising things, but at the same time, they don't own your risk, right? They don't own your cybersecurity. They're not regulated. So they can say whatever they want to say to you, right? At the end of the day, the person who's responsible for utilizing that technology, for what happens wrong with that technology, if your data is breached, you're on the hook, right? They're not. And therein lies the broken condition we were in way before as an industry we have with SaaS vendors. It's the reality that is scaling factorially right now with these same vendors offering AI, not even understanding guardrails. In the meantime, the regulators haven't even really got a chance to even absorb what this is, because we're still trying to define what it is. And in the meantime, this is just accelerating. And you watch what's happened with OpenClaw and the disaster that is, in my opinion. But yet cool, but not ready for our industry. So now I kind of painted that picture before I kind of answer everything for UP. Mimi, what would you say to that question first? Because first thing is go to your compliance person.
We may
Mimi, you there? Did we lose you?
me. Yeah, I think we lost her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so
I'll do it then. So let me go ahead and,
Sure.
hey, Sid, so Sid, if somebody was to engage your firm
yes.
today, how would they engage your firm to solve that problem? And I can tell you how we're doing it with your technology.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things that, if we're talking specifically about AI use, one of the first things that we would do is we would help firms build a pretty comprehensive AI policy and procedure document, right? So we actually have a policies and procedures capability. Mimi is a key part of that. She will actually work with firms to kind of help define that and further qualify it. In fact, it's funny. We recently got access to some of the questions that FINRA is asking firms and the SEC. Things like, where is AI used today, right? Is it in internal systems? Is it in, field reps, vendor tools, employee use, right? What do you define as a model, right? Which is something Mimi touched upon, right? These are some very basic questions that a lot of firms have to sort of identify, right? Do they inventory all the models and all the AI use? What tools are using them? And this is not just ChatGPT. this is every software vendor that has AI embedded in it, right? So you have to have a pretty comprehensive sort of inventory. A big thing that we're starting to see, and we saw this in a prior regime, right, in the last decade, was the establishment of the cybersecurity office, right, or the chief security officer, right? There's now a lot of organizations, and Aaron, you can talk a little bit about this, right? You've got a committee now, probably within the firm, that does AI governance. It's kind of an AI governance committee, right? That defines the policies, checks and balances around that. And then the most important thing is once you've defined the policy, how do you enforce it? So you've got to define the policy, and then you got to have a way to put controls in place, and you got to have evidence to show that you are following the policy that you have. There's no point documenting a policy if you have no way of enforcing it, right? So in order to go all the way, having the policy and then enforcing it. And this is very much similar to what happened with cybersecurity, right? You'd have to have a cybersecurity policy, and then you'd have to enforce it. And now we're just seeing AI being an additional sort of layer.
Right.
Vendor due diligence that was there even before, right?
So Sid, let's talk about that, because
Yeah.
this is something that, is near and dear to any compliance officer's heart, or any risk officer, or anybody that is in leadership or responsibility series 24 or on the hook, which is, if you set the policy, right, it becomes, then how do you enforce it and oversight it, right? And the greatest risk you face as an entity is, from a regulatory perspective, is setting a policy that you cannot oversight, right?
You can't follow.
And you can't follow, right? And so, and I do think it's a real risk, and I do think your product has a unique capability to address this risk, which is, if you say to somebody, you can't do something, okay, then you got to have a way of monitoring that, right? And so let's say, for example, the most common thing you should say to any of your advisors is, do not use OpenAI or Claude for your business direct, right? For many different reasons, right? And so you might say, well, we allow it for marketing, or we allow it for this. Okay. Well, if you're going to say that, you need to work. In our case at United Planners, we have a vendor we work with, Hamachi, does guardrails for that kind of thing. And so we say yes, and they can go direct to the models, but Hamachi just plays a very unique role for us to make sure that all that is going through some kind of guardrails. But we said, yes, you can use Hamachi, but then we're saying, no, you can't use OpenAI directly. Well, how do I even know if they're circumventing that? And if
Right.
they have circumvented it, and they did create a data leakage, now all of a sudden you're in as much trouble for that. So you got to say yes to something, but you got to be able to enforce the no. And the problem with AI, and just so everybody is aware of this, and it's really important, is that the guardrail with OpenAI, Claude, or any of these, when you pay for the subscription, is software.
Right.
Meaning it's a click that says, check mark, don't learn on my data. Okay. First of all, whether you hit that check mark or not, it's its own problem. But beyond that, anybody that understands software, as a software engineer, understands the story of what happened with Dropbox back in the day.
Right.
Because there was a time in which Dropbox did a release in which software allowed for everybody to enter anybody else's password and get into Dropbox many years ago. If anybody understands any zero-day attack, it's always a software attack, right?
Right.
So, and if anybody was really interested in causing havoc or data breaches, these circumventing these check marks. And so from a cybersecurity perspective, here's your number one rule. If they have a check mark that says, learn on my data or not learn on my data, the answer is your data is probably compromised, okay?
Right.
So just assume that. So then the issue becomes, are you going to use a closed model, or are you going to go through a good guardrail system that's going to clean the data, and you're going to trust to clean the data before it goes to the OpenAI? But if you're going to do all those things, you have to have somebody like myself and my team and my governance that are people that are even capable of asking the right questions, even knowing what these people are even saying to you, and acting as your advocate and your protector, and working with you as an advisor. And so there's many advisors that do not have a relationship. Maybe they're relying on Schwab. I think that's a risk. And if you're just working with a single vendor, that might not be so bad. But you are going to have to really, in the AI world, ask yourself, are you an advisor who's relationship and manages money, or are you a cybersecurity guru with AI, knowledge, and that's what you're doing.
Right.
Because the reality is you got to lean on firms like ours and technology like Surge to empower what you're going to be doing, cybersecurity, governance, regulatory. And that's the beauty of anybody that's out there looking to tackle this on. Join firms like ours. More importantly, utilize technologies like Surge to power your stack. And that's how you're going to move forward in the industry. That's,
It
again,
makes total sense. I mean, it's funny you say this, Aaron, but I talk to a lot of advisors and BD environments, right, or CIOs, and a lot of them will say to me, and this is very similar to what happened with the mobile generation, about 10 years ago, right? You'll get people saying, we don't allow our advisors to use mobile devices for work. Well, that sounds great, but how do you really know, right? And then the other question on AI is, are your advisors using AI? And I get a lot of folks saying, well, we tell them that they can't use ChatGPT or they can't use Claude. But then the question is, how do you know? And then the second point is, even if they're not using any of those LLMs by paying $20 a month or $200 a month, by virtue of using Office, Microsoft Office, you're already using Copilot. You
beyond
already
that, your
have Copilot
iPhone, your Android.
on your Android. And so,
Yeah.
you might just think, oh, I have Copilot running and I might just take my Excel spreadsheet and run ask AI some questions or make it do maybe do some interesting things where I don't have to do a pivot table, but the Copilot does it for me, right? Now, where's that data stored? Is that data stored locally? Is that data stored in Microsoft servers? Did you authorize that? How does that map to your privacy policy? So there's very simple things that are happening today, even for unsuspecting advisors that, aren't actively going out and using these LLMs and paying $20 a month. AI is coming to them in terms of software use, right? And so we're seeing the attack surface suddenly increasing significantly. And so it's not only a security threat, it's a regulatory threat because now suddenly a lot of firms are not compliant with their own policies. And so that's
Yeah.
why
Well,
governance
and Sid,
is
Right.
super important.
that's the same reason why the regulators are now asking for firms to look at not just their direct vendors, but their vendors' vendors and the vendors' as to whether or not they're using AI. And that's the challenge that CCOs have right now, is they don't know what they don't know. And since most of them aren't technology people, they're having to depend on the individuals like you and Aaron to help them, because from a regulatory standpoint, the regulators expect the CCO to be able to explain how the firm is using the system and if the firm is using AI and how is it being used.
Right.
And
So
so
let's
it creates a
maybe to that,
huge
yeah, to that
issue.
point, this is the issue, by the way, like you said. Are they using AI? Okay. Well, that's just so what is AI, right?
Right.
Okay. And so you got, well, to anybody that's listening to podcasts, right? So AI at the end of the day is just mathematical algorithm that's doing pattern detection and works in a vector database and all these things. It's not magic, it's just math, okay? And so as it's just math, and it's actually of all things math and physics, it is in the old days we had OLAP reporting and different types of pattern detections. And so it is a pattern detection, and a lot of what you see today is a lot of mystery as far as like people make it sound mystical. But in pattern
Right.
detection, it becomes a question of, okay, when they say they use AI from a marketing perspective, that's the first confusion, right? Because you can write bots and those are like considered AI. And so I've talked to vendors like, oh, you use AI and they're just writing Python scripts. I say Python scripts because it's code. And so they're writing code and they're calling it AI. And so you have this challenge, which is the marketing that's going on versus the reality of what they're really doing. And then within that, pulling apart what is the cybersecurity risk and what is the risk to your data and your clients. And then ultimately, all of this being done at, oh, by the way, we're giving away AI for free. Okay, well, that's a warning. right? Why is that a warning? Well, okay, but something as risky as AI to be given away for free sounds a lot more like marketing, and the check's going to come due at some point.
Yeah.
I prefer them to say, and I'm going to charge you more because I really want to protect your data. So we're going back into the same pattern, which is they're either trying to sell the product to a investor, which is a risk to you because now you built your whole platform on something they're going to turn around and change the pricing on, which is happening in our industry. So free is its own risk. And so these challenges are going on in real time and have already existed. The regulators have always expected the advisor to look at the vendor, right? And you need a SurgeONE to even do that. But now you're looking at vendor, and now you're not only asking stack questions and technology questions, asking now AI questions. And even what does that mean?
Right.
So just to make the advisors scared, yeah. Make broker-dealers scared, yes. Because the end of the day is you saying something, don't do it, is actually your greatest risk.
Yeah.
Right? Because say don't do it to your kids, say don't do it to your teenager.
Yeah.
The reality is don't do it. We all know is the reality. How are you going to be an advisor building and competing in the market if you're not considering, your digital advice platform, which they call Robo? If you're not considering your stack and how you're going to, meet your clients' needs when they're Gen Z, if you're not considering how you're going to handle AI, and more importantly, how you're going to handle agentic to be able to scale. So these are things that are real that advisors need to be thinking about, and they need to partner with firms like ours that enable that, and technology like yours that enable that. And so I think if you're an advisor today and you're an enterprise advisor, you can use a SurgeONE to get you way above the challenges we face in the industry. I am going to say, and maybe Mimi will disagree with this, but we are in a world, and I really suggest it, that a SurgeONE is a platform that is the old get you ahead of the bear, right? So as the bear is chasing you, when it comes to regulators, ultimately you don't want to be the slowest guy, right? And so SurgeONE allows you to say, give the regulators answers, right? I have a platform, right? And it's a real platform. It allows me to do governance, allows me to do all of these things and monitor my advice. And that's what they're asking for. But if you don't even have a SurgeONE and you're saying we don't allow it, or it's in our policy and we just see them once a year in an exam, Mimi, what do you think is going to happen?
They're going to treat it the same way they do. We don't use text messaging for business.
That's
Prove
right.
it.
It's the next off-channel communication.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly.
Email off. Exactly, Mimi. That was a perfect answer because that's what's coming, right? Because anybody that says is, well, we say no to text messaging,
Yeah.
but then all of a sudden they find an advisor that was text messaging a client,
That's
right? What's going to happen
We've
to that
seen it.
firm?
We've seen it on off-channel communications. We've seen it in the last couple of years too with off-channel cloud storage, if you will, of data.
Or
And
CRMs
that's
that weren't disclosed.
exactly.
Yeah.
CRM systems. That's exactly why FINRA started sending out the vendor
Shadow IT.
questions,
Shadow
and
IT.
now they're digging deeper.
So,
So-
it's funny. This reminds me of a story. Yesterday, I was at a compliance roundtable. I'm not going to say which one. And one of the speakers was, it was it was eye-opening for me. One of the speakers was advocating that firms should take their policies and procedures and put them in Gemini, upload them to Gemini, or upload them to ChatGPT, or upload them to Claude, and compare the result from the three models, okay? And choose. Don't be afraid of choosing these tools because they really do a good job. And see which tool works for you and which one doesn't work for you, right? So there's workshops happening where folks are advocating the use of technology like AI.
right.
Now, think about your policies and procedures, right? Everything that you do within your firm, what systems you use, what
Right.
which vendors you might be using, how you police those systems, all that's documented or should be in your policies and procedures. Now, this is sitting in an OpenAI server somewhere, or it's sitting in
Yeah.
Claude somewhere, so that the next guy that's asking OpenAI to write a policies and procedures document will probably have some of the learnings from this first person who uploaded all these documents, right? It's the network effect. So this is what's happening. These are the dangers.
Yeah.
People are,
Well, and that's the challenge, Sid, that small firms have, because the CCOs in the small firm, they don't have necessarily the resources of you or Aaron, and they may be wearing multiple hats because they may be the business owner as well as tag you're it, the chief compliance officer. They want a solution. They want something to help them. So they're going to go to the first vendor that says, here, let me give you this, and it's got AI and you can use it and it'll solve all your problems. But they don't know the questions to ask as to whether or not this is a tool that has the guardrails and controls around it that to protect their data or to protect their people.
Yeah, and George, I think you have some follow-up questions here, but I think, again, we've been using some buzzwords even in this meeting, and I think it's like we use the word guardrails, which is its own technology. We've been talking about agentic, which is its own stack and technology and spans. And so, where we started with this is all these definitions, using these open tools, what are the risks? And it's important to know that even with all these risks we're talking about, that you can use an AI tool to look at your procedures and compare them, powered by SurgeONE, which is the right way to do it, versus
Agreed.
just using an open, tool. And in future podcasts we could talk more and educate advisors more on AI and how it actually works, the physics and things like that. But just to suffice to say, most vendors you're working with don't know AI much better than you do. They're just probably vibe coding, which is a whole other word out there now, just as much as the next person, right? So go ahead, George, question.
No, so this is great. Very good, very good discussion. We're actually out of time. So what I would like to ask you from each of you, if you don't mind, giving a quick final kind of conclusion of what we discussed, that as a takeaway for the audience.
Go ahead,
You
Sid.
yeah, I mean, I think, Aaron, you touched upon a lot of interesting points, and I think United Planners is taking we're excited to be working with you guys. I mean, you guys are taking a very proactive approach towards how you're enforcing your policies in and around, applications, software, AI being part of that. So we're excited to be part of that. And I think my big thing is for firms, if they aren't already thinking about this issue, they should be. You should be working actively, whether you're a broker dealer, whether you're an investment advisor, you should be working on an AI use policy. You should be documenting all the systems, inventorying them, and having controls. Once you have that AI use policy, you got to have a way to supervise and implement those controls, because the regulators are going to ask you. It's already happening. And so don't have the ostrich syndrome and assume that no one's using AI. People are using AI. They're actively, moving data to AI. It might be your client data. And so you don't want to be caught up in that. And so from our perspective, it pays to be vigilant in this area.
Mimi?
Agreed. I would say for me, it goes back to firms need to be thoughtful and cautious when adopting new technologies and tools, and making sure that compliance is part of that decision process, because otherwise, it goes back to the old adage we all grew up with of act in haste, repent in leisure. But now if you adopt something quickly and you don't have those controls in place around it, you're going to be typically repenting in an on-the-record testimony under a microscope. So that is the last place you want to be figuring out, oh, gee, I should have thought about this beforehand. So you want to make sure that you take that time. Don't just rush because everybody else is. You need to find the right partner, and you need to leverage technology that is built by compliance as well, because there's a lot of vendors out there that don't have the compliance or regulatory experience, so they're not going to know to be able to help you or advise you on how to implement or what controls to put in place.
So my perspective and final word is this is an example of all ships rise together. So if you're a small to medium-sized advisory firm out there, a small to medium-sized broker-dealer out there, my suggestion to you is choose a culture when you're choosing vendors and choose a partner you can grow with. And in this case, highly suggest that you join United Planners in this journey with Surge, because the benefit you're going to get from that is all of our thought leadership as we work with Surge as an enterprise and for all of our needs. You're going to benefit from all of that. Whether it's all the work we're doing with them on building out a Reg Ed replacement platform, everything we're doing within the data hubbing with Covair, what we're doing with Kite Cyber and Jay and all of their utilizing their resources that they have and their team. As we do that as an organization, we're encouraging everybody else to do the same, because you can learn from us and we can learn from you. And let's build this stack together. And as an enterprises that are out there that are making the decision, it'd be the same answer. This is not, when it comes to compliance, cybersecurity, my long-term perspective on this, when I founded Cleverdome back in the day, open sourced all of our due diligence standards, and have been a open sharing community focused firm, is this compliance cybersecurity technology is a all ships rise together initiative. And I would encourage you to join us, what we're doing with Surge, and helping all of us build a platform that's will enable all of us to get a better perspective on vendor due diligence risk, cybersecurity risk, and all the things that we need to do as we kind of face this new challenge of saying yes to AI, but doing so in a regulated world in which our obligation is to the consumer, to protect their data and to protect their financial interest. And we're ultimately all fiduciary to that. And this type of platform allows us to be a fiduciary at scale. And I would just encourage people to partner with what we're doing here.
Great. Thank you so much. So, as I said, we're out of time. So for people who submitted questions, we'll reach out to you directly, and we'll respond to those via email. If you still have a few questions, please feel free to send them. Send us your email address, and we'll get back to you. So this brings us to the end of the session. A big thank you to you, Sid, Mimi, and Aaron for the thoughtful discussion, and thank you for everyone who joined us today. We hope this conversation gave you practical insight into how firms are approaching AI governance in real operational environments. A recording of today's webinar will be shared with all registrants, so you can revisit the discussion or share it with your team. And to learn more about SurgeONE's approach to combining AI with expert-led compliance support, please visit SurgeONE.ai. Thank you again for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.